Great. So moving on, just a brief overview of the agenda, and then I will stop talking. First, we're going to hear from experts with different perspectives on jobs, work, and economic recovery in Canada. They'll be commenting on the challenges and opportunities with respect to helping workers access employment. Next, we will introduce you to the Job Pathways research and the approach that we're taking with this project. We'll tell you what you can expect from us and when we'll be sharing lessons, tools, and findings at different stages of the project. Finally, we'll invite input from you. And for us, this may be the most important part of the session. We'd really encourage you to tell us on this call or in the future what you'd like to see out of the research that we're conducting so that we can ensure that it's as valuable and impactful as possible. I'll be handing the rest of the presentation now off to Kimberly Bowman, who is the project lead for our Job Pathways project and can introduce the panelists and the project in more depth. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It looks like everything is progressing as it's supposed to, so I'm going to keep talking, and I'm sure someone will tell me if there are technical difficulties. As Sarah said, I'm Kimberly Bowman of the Job Pathways team. We're really pleased to kick off the webinar today with some short presentations from 3 actors who have different vantage points on the skills-related challenges facing Canadians, and for one of them on the food retail sector in particular. We think they'll provide some food for thought, if you can excuse the pun, while also helping us better understand and remember the context that we find ourselves in. So let's get started. Our first panelist is actually not with us in person virtually at the moment. Ruth Darlington is a grocery worker advisor on the project. She currently works at a big box grocery store in Thunder Bay. Drawing on her lived experience, Ruth will be helping us to shape our interactions with workers. Ruth has shared an audio recording of her remarks because one of the realities of grocery work is that it's shift work. 9 to 5 hours don't always apply. And so now we're going to hear from Ruth. You'll hear her voice for about 4 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruth Darlington. I work at a grocery store in Thunder Bay, Ontario. My experience working in this sector had been an interesting one. I work with an amazing group of individuals who, together or as a team, we serve the community or customers in a respectful, effective, and efficient manner. There were many good and bad experiences that I have had since working in this sector. Bad experiences were in the form of dealing with racist customers, dealing with impatient customers, dealing with customers who come into the store with some sort of or some sense of entitlement, who basically want to tell you how to do your job and what you should do. On the other hand, good experiences would be in the form of dealing with customers who leaves a smile on your face at the end of their transactions, especially from the start of this pandemic, COVID-19, there were customers who outright told you that they respect your job and thank you for coming to work, because they realize that if we don't go to work, then they would not be able to get their groceries. I have decided to become an advisor because I want to be a part of effective change. I want to be a part of something that's unique, something that's authentic. So that's why I have decided to become an advisor. And I know that this role will give me the opportunity to bring all the wealth of experiences to the table, and that will be able to inform important parts of this research. The changes that I have seen in this sector since COVID-19 would be in the form of educating staff on how to protect themselves and others, reinforcing social distancing, hand washing and sanitizing of hands upon entering and leaving the store, mandatory mask wearing, and also advertisement. Our uniform, the shirts that we wear to work every day has slogans saying "I am social distancing," respect social distancing, keep 6 feet apart, posters all over the store reinforcing this so that customers would protect themselves and at the same time protect others. So I'm happy to be a part of this research, and I'm looking forward to working with this amazing team.
Thank you. That was Ruth Darlington from Thunder Bay. Ruth is one of 4 people who join our panel of expert advisors who are currently working in the food retail sector as grocery workers in Ontario. And we're very excited about the expertise that they can bring to the research project. Our next panelist is Rhonda Fernandez. Rhonda is the Executive Director of Skills Innovation at Employment and Social Development Canada. She is the lead on Future Skills, which is a federal initiative that's part of the government's plan to ensure that Canada's skills development policies and programs are prepared to meet Canadians' changing needs. We'll now hand the floor to Rhonda.
Thanks so much, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate in the discussion today. I really appreciated having Ruth's comments be the start of the conversation, because I think that should be the start of all of our conversations, is starting with the people at the center of the conversation in terms of who the things that we're talking about affect. So really appreciate that that's how you guys have started this conversation. Maybe just sort of sharing a few different perspectives in Employment and Social Development Canada. We are part of the federal government, and so we are looking at employment issues from a pan-Canadian perspective. And so I think, in preparing for coming into this discussion today, maybe a few things to sort of help initiate the conversation. I think that within anything related with food sector or retail sector, there's been discussions for a number of years in terms of what does the changing nature of work mean for workers within these sectors. We've been talking about automation and digitization for some time, and what does that mean in terms of what will be the expectations for workers in terms of the tasks that they will be needing to do, and how do we support people to upskill and reskill to continue to meet those expectations on the job. So I envision that that'll be part of the work as you go forward in terms of thinking through how do we better support people. In light of COVID, obviously we've all seen some significant effects in terms of the food retail sector, in terms of the effects it's had on workers who have been deemed essential and have had to go to work, but also in terms of in other employment situations where some people haven't been able to maintain their employment at the same level that they were pre-COVID. And so this is raising obviously a lot of questions in terms of what will this mean for people in the short term, but also in the medium term in terms of employment prospects for individuals. And so I think that leads us into a conversation in terms of what will we do to support people who will stay within the sector over time. And so what will be changes that we will see as a result of COVID. So a number of people are talking about how this might accelerate automation and digitization. And so what will that mean in terms of workers who will stay within the sector, and how do we support them? But then also the question I think that you're looking at in terms of pathways to employment and other prospects for people. And so how will we support people in those transitions? I'm looking forward to the discussion today. I think maybe a few questions that we all think about is how do we support people to make informed decisions? So how do we help people to see the strengths that they've got and the skills that they've got, and help them to think about what might be opportunities that they'd like to pursue and to better understand what might be the gaps that they might be experiencing. And so the first part of it is sort of really understanding what their needs are and where should they focus their efforts. I think the second part of that is obviously to support people to pursue training. And so what are the ways that we can make that as seamless and as easy as possible for people to pursue new opportunities? So I think I'll just stop there. Happy to participate in the discussion as we go forward, but really looking forward to seeing how this conversation goes today, but also to follow this project as it progresses in the months ahead. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Rhonda. We appreciate your remarks and your interest in helping us frame this project and try and keep it as useful as it can be. Our final panelist comes to us from Calgary today. Dexter Lamb is the Manager of Talent at Calgary Economic Development, where he works at the intersection of research and strategy to prepare Calgarians for workforce transition and support business attraction. Thanks, Dexter, for joining us. We'll now pass the floor to you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kimberly. This is an interesting project, and we came across the work that Brookfield's doing with this Job Pathways project a bit fortuitously. So Calgary is particularly an interesting study, and there's some interesting parallels in that there's levels of transition that the city is going through as a community, but also at the individual level. And this is relevant in a lot of different ways in some of the work we've been doing to try to help people transition careers. So as a city and an economy, everyone typically thinks of Calgary as the energy economy, and that's about it. But in reality, while it's still about 25% of our GDP, it's 20% of our employment. We have a city of 1.3 million, and we still have most of the city that still doesn't work in oil and gas. So it's oil and gas and energy is not the only game in town, despite the pain that it's gone through. And that's some real pain. In the peak of the 2014 to 2016 oil crash, the industry lost about 130,000 jobs. In the period of COVID, it lost around 60 to 70,000 jobs. In the time since COVID, though, we've recovered about 47% as a city of the COVID period job losses. So, we are still suffering some pain and a fair amount of pain, but there's a lot of opportunity here for people to transition. Whether you were in the oil and gas sector, you still have a lot of things that keep people employed and keep people working meaningfully in the city. Finance, for instance, is 20% of our GDP and 10% of our employment. So from a diversification standpoint, our employment is actually spread across pretty evenly across probably 10 or so sectors. And so when we look at the pain that certain particular industries feel, it doesn't necessarily define us in reality, even though it does define us by a certain collective identity. And that's something that I think is a theme that we're learning very much about. When we look at, despite the pain, the city as a canvas for transformation is a really neat opportunity. We still have the highest levels of educational attainment. We still rank amongst the highest cities in the world, not just Canada, but in the world, for livability, meaning high quality of life for a very reasonable cost of living. When we look at our workforce, it's quite young. We have, if anything, a bit of a double-edged sword in our labor force participation. And that is, despite our economic hits and our employment hits, the highest labor force participation rates across all major cities in Canada at 72%. And that's persistent. In some ways, through a period of transition, people's mindset, culturally and identity-wise, is I need to be working, I need to be working, I need to be working. So when we looked at all of these factors all together, and the impacts on the energy sector, we've been trying to find different ways to help people transition to different sectors and find meaningful jobs. We did a study in 2016, 2017 around skills transferability of mid-level energy workers. So your engineers, your finance people, your accountants, That's primarily what energy companies are. And look to see what could they move into. And tech actually was a very good fit. There was a high degree of transferability. And we started creating a program internally for reskilling and upskilling. At the same time, we started to see a proliferation of these upskilling and reskilling programs offered at various points in different forms throughout the city as well. So our program called Edge Up was a bit of an experiment. We wanted to see if we could use the opportunity to actually better understand this job transition journey. And so the model was that if we take mid-level to senior level energy workers who had been displaced, it's a competitive process, mostly so we can learn a bit more about the people. What is their profile? What are the skills they have? So that we can learn from this, and so we can have an opportunity to better understand them. And then work them through a structured program of upskilling and gaining new tech skills in partnership with a whole host of post-secondary institutions across Calgary. And we've been oversubscribed for the first year. We ran 2 cohorts, high demand. A lot of people are super interested. Great stickiness in terms of the skills development phase. And so what we found was, yes, it's very true that there was a high degree of complementarity between our energy workers and tech skills. What we were finding, though, after a while was that it's not just about the city in transition, but that the individuals themselves, Calgarians as individuals, are going through an identity transition. And that's a big struggle too. So as much as the tech skills and energy sector skills were complementary, the identities and the culture were a gap to still cover. People were struggling to make that full transition from an energy sector worker with tech skills into adopting themselves and seeing themselves as a tech worker. So there's a number of factors there, and we're very keen on seeing the work that Brookfield's doing with the Job Pathways program, because we are wondering and very curious to see if there are some commonalities between industries and geographies that we can learn from. Things around seniority, or when you go from one industry to the next, what level did you come from? In our case with Edge Up, you have mid-level to senior level people starting their whole careers over, and in tech, they're joining as brand new juniors. Pay is another one. When someone's been earning 6 figures for 10, 15, 20 years, to start at 5 figures is quite a shock from an identity standpoint, but also from a lifestyle and family obligation standpoint. And so those barriers to fully embracing a transition remain, and that's something we are looking to work on as the next phase of our upskilling and reskilling offering, so that it's not just about skills, but it is about trying to figure out what is the whole comprehensive suite of supports needed to help bring people and make those transitions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dexter. And to all of our panelists, thank you. I think it's really as though there are lots of challenges with Zoom, but it is really nice to be able to connect with different experts who are so plugged in different ways across Canada. So I'm just going to note now that we do have time allocated for both your contributions when we'd like to hear from you and for a question and answer. But if you've got ideas, responses, comments, questions, anything like that, please do use the chat function. That's what it's there for. So we're happy for people to talk to each other or talk to us. We may not see your comments immediately, but we've got time where we will be looking at them later on. We've got a little over 40 people on the webinar today, so we're not able to turn on your cameras and really get talking to each other properly, but we'd love to see that in the chat function. So for the next 15 minutes, I'm tasked with giving you an overview of the Job Pathways in Food Retail project. And as we're expecting it to unfold from this fall to next spring, I'm speaking about the work of a lot of different people, and in particular our project team, Annalise Huynh, Diana Rivera, Yasmin Rajavi, Erin Warner, and Siwa Kim. And so we hope that the next 15 minutes will give you a little understanding of what the Brookfield Institute's Job Pathways approach looks like as a method, as a model, but also that team's particular plans for research and pathfinding in Ontario. And as Sarah said, we'd love to continue the conversation one-to-one on email or off this webinar. So if you hear something that sounds interesting or something that isn't quite clear, you can use the chat bar or you can connect with us directly. Our contact information is on the web and on our last slide. So we're going to kick this off. If you're familiar with this space, then the idea of job pathways is probably familiar to you. This isn't radically new, but what we're really excited about in terms of the Brookfield Institute's model is that we think it's a little unique and that it could genuinely add value in its ability to pull from some of the best approaches and to systematically investigate options that work for both workers and for employers in a real-life labor market. So in particular, the approach leverages insights from data. We do use a skills adjacency model, and we're looking at accessing data from different sources, from Statistics Canada, from the Labour Market Information Council's new dashboard, and then from some excellent local sources that we're finding, such as from local workforce planning boards. We know that data and data-driven insights can be really powerful, but we need to understand these against their particular context, their local and their labour market context. So we'll talk a bit later about our interests in areas like Thunder Bay, Ingersoll, Vaughan, and Toronto. And in those places, we're finding that the advice and the opinion of local experts and local employers can help us check and test our assumptions. And then finally and critically, this approach uses a human-centered design lens. Labor markets are filled with humans, and our approach demands deep empathy, engagement of the right stakeholders locally and beyond, and a willingness to try and iterate, get things wrong, and try again. So we really thank you for taking the time today to understand this promising model that we're proud of and very excited about testing and further developing in Ontario in the food retail sector. And we're very excited to hear your input, your ideas on this approach and where it could deliver for you. We'll talk a bit about the grocery sector. Canada's home to 346,000 cashiers and nearly 181,000 grocery store clerks and shelf stockers. It's huge numbers. So we know that they're critically important and they're essential workers, and it's always been this way. But if you're anything like me, over the last 6.5 months, we see and we feel that much more intensely. We're reminded of it every time we go to the grocery store. So this project was conceived, as Sarah said, before the pandemic, as a suite of changes and technologies were poised to disrupt or to dramatically change the food retail landscape in Canada, and perhaps put some of those essential workers' jobs at risk. We don't have a crystal ball, so we can't predict perfectly where we're going or where that sector or those jobs are going exactly. But we do know that change happens. And so we are applying the Job Pathways approach to understand potential opportunities for grocery cashiers and clerks were they to transition out of those particular occupations in the future. Now, interestingly, we won't get into this too much, but we're also taking the opportunity to test our approach backwards. So we'll be looking at jobs that appear to be robust or growing based on some of our research to date. And then from there, we'll ask where and how could we support Ontarians to move into these new opportunities. So for us as a team, it's going to be a busy year. We wanted to say a thank you and take a moment to pause and acknowledge our partners. So you'll see on the slide, UFCW Canada, JP Morgan Chase and Company, and Employment Ontario. And without their support, this project couldn't happen. They are silent partners on the call right now, but they are out there, and we're tremendously grateful and excited to be working with them. All right, let's get on and tell you about the project. This slide has a lot of words, so we'll include it, and you're welcome to read it, but I'll summarize it briefly. We really want this project to be useful and our findings to be used. We're looking to develop methods and learn lessons that can be applied by people like you. At the Brookfield Institute, our skills work stream focuses on understanding future skills demands across Canada to help companies and people gain the skills that they need to thrive in an innovation-driven economy. So we're delighted to be partnering with UFCW, who already have a robust online education program for their members and their families, which will be served by this project. And while we know that this project was designed conceived in a pre-COVID era, the economic disruption that's here and coming means that it matters as much or more. So please do consider the advice that you might have for us as you hear about this presentation to help us ensure that we're responding to needs that are up to date. We know that things are moving fast. So we'll tell you a little about some of the insights that we're hoping to generate through the course of this project. They're quite broad and we find them very interesting. It's a large project, and so we're expecting to learn and share in a couple of different areas. Firstly, we're looking at the food retail sector, as we've said, and that sector is shifting and transforming in really unusual and dynamic ways. So we're looking forward to learning and sharing what people tell us about those trends and those forces in the food retail sector and what they might mean for jobs in the future. We're also excited about learning what matters to workers themselves, using primary qualitative research to listen to grocery workers and ensure that factors into the filters that we use in our model. Now, of course, we're also speaking to local employers. It's really critically important that we're listening to all of the humans involved at all sides of this. But this kind of primary research and the opportunity to do it is unique and exciting, and we think very promising. And of course, we'll be testing and improving the model and look forward to sharing the methodological things that we learn over the coming months. We default to open, and so we're looking forward to sharing both the tools and the lessons through blogs and events. Our final reports will be out next spring. So we'll talk a little bit about the research itself and what it could look like. As I mentioned, we're looking at 4 sites. What we wanted to do was select communities that looked pretty different. So we will be going out and looking in particular and testing the model in Thunder Bay, in Vaughan, in Ingersoll, and in Toronto. We're already learning a lot about these places and their particular histories, their communities, their local labor markets. There are some folks on this call from local workforce development actors and partners, and they're already being incredibly helpful, helping us make the important local connections that are really, really hard to make virtually. And so we will have some findings that relate to those sites specifically, but we hope that the difference in those sites will make sure that our method is as transferable or as applicable in different places as possible. The Brookfield Institute is housed at Ryerson University, and we will launch our fieldwork once our instruments and our approach receive the full approval of the ethics board at that university. So we're expecting that to happen soon, and we'll be undertaking fieldwork for about 16 weeks from October or so. We're looking to share our findings in early 2021, and our final reports will be in the spring. As you've already seen, we like to blog, we like to share, so you'll be seeing some informal outputs, some blogs, and some lessons as we go. But you can expect the formal report with the full outline of the model as it was tested both backwards and with these food retail jobs in the spring. As Sarah said, if you find yourself facing a decision or asking questions that you think we might be able to help with, please do get in touch before spring. We know that policymakers and teams are facing real challenges, and if we've got useful insights to share, we are happy to do so. Just be in touch. I'll tell you a little about the methods, and in particular around the primary data collection. There's more detail on the model, on the mixed methods and how it's applied on our website in a playbook that was published last year and that will be updated after this project. So if you're looking for more methodological detail and a step-by-step approach, you can look there or contact our team. But one of the most exciting elements of the project, at least for a research geek like me, is the opportunity to do qualitative research with workers in Ontario and with employers in these communities. It feels like a really rare and true gift to get to do this intentionally and to connect it to something that has such potential for use. We think it's work that could really allow us to strengthen an already strong model. Our plans involve a few different approaches. Expert interviews are a really core component of the method to make sure that we're rooting ourselves in reality with what local economic experts and employers tell us. And these, along with literature reviews, have already begun as a preliminary stage of the project. When we do start working with with workers and going out and talking to people about their lives and their jobs, one of the first elements is cultural probes, which pulls from the ethnographic tradition. Sorry. We'll be undertaking fairly intensive work over a number of weeks with 6 to 8 workers who are grocery workers in Ontario, and we'll use digital media like WhatsApp to communicate with them and gain insights on their lives. So you can imagine someone answering questions, taking photographs, videoing themselves, and providing a little bit of insight into what their day-to-day life is, how they see their job, how they see their job transition. I think the cultural probes piece is really interesting and an exciting first step for us. You'll also see focus groups and interviews on there. You'll know that COVID has sort of taken traditional focus groups face-to-face off of the table. We said, you know, the one thing that we know is that we will not be gathering groups of people in small rooms, sitting in a closed circle and having conversations. But just like this, we can do that over Zoom or use digital tools. So we will be running a range of different Zoom-based groups with current grocery workers from across the province. And then finally, we're looking at deploying an online survey to help us better understand workers' priorities and the kind of value they place on different things and different considerations and transitions. We hope that the survey will allow us to reach more people with different kinds of characteristics and life circumstances, so we can really pick apart what matters for different individuals in different places. I have zoomed through that fairly fast, so I hope that there's it was clear. There's a lot in there, and we are very excited about this project. As Sarah said, really one of the critically important parts for us as a research team is not just the research and that it is high quality and produces a beautiful report, but really the opportunity for the research to interact with the needs and uses across Canada at this time. We're very excited to have our existing relationships with UFCW and to be talking to actors like ESBC, who really have their finger on the pulse of what's happening. But there are more than 40 folks on this call who know what's happening in your communities or who have some sense of needs and opportunities across Ontario and across Canada. So we would love to really offer up the floor through the chat feature to you. And in the future, we'd love you to continue to engage with us. So please consider accompanying the team. If you've got particular thoughts that you'd like to offer up for interviews, we would love that. And we are able as well to, as I said, provide some briefings or respond to questions and help you understand some of our emerging findings as they come. So what we'd really love to know from you are, we've got a couple of questions. Okay. So the engagement starts now. If you've got a coffee and put it down, grab your keyboard and let us know what you think. We'd love to know what do we need to get right here, or what would you caution us against getting wrong, and are there particular outputs, any particular reports, logs, insights that you would be interested in helping us frame? We already had a couple of comments from folks. We heard from Rhonda the question about how do we support people to make informed decisions as they move? How do we make sure that people have the information that they need about themselves and about opportunities as they consider transitions? We heard an interesting question from Dexter as well, or an observation about individual level transitions, about people's personal identity and cultural identity and the process that someone might need to go through as they move from one job to another. If anybody has any thoughts on those questions, those challenges, or on what you are seeing in your job or in your community, we'd love to hear it now. So you should see a chat feature at the bottom. I see something from Solomon. Solomon Thomas says, thank you. Julian Mason has a question. She says, as Brookfield has recognized the power of harnessing the job pathway, think of a relay runner whose value as an individual fast runner can't be realized if they're not taught how to pass and receive the baton. If an individual doesn't have a barrier and a gap-free pathway from job seeking to securing and keeping a job, they're not going to succeed in that transition. If they don't have clear line of sight to a job and awareness of and access to all the steps along that way and what that requires, they can't seamlessly navigate the pathway, and they often don't progress towards jobs as those who design those programs with the best of intentions would expect. So how do we as a community move towards a more systems approach to this work? There's a challenging and fascinating question, open question from Jillian Mason. I've just read it. We'd love to hear comments from you about systems approaches to a very complex and challenging question. We also reference the human-centered design approach and our attempt to test different methods and see how they work. So this is a great opportunity for us as a team to see if this chat function actually works, or if conversations are best had face-to-face. Oh, looks like we've got a second question here. Sue Watts, is there a reason that Eastern Ontario is not included? Thanks for the prompt, Yasmin. No, there's no intentional reason that Eastern Ontario is not included. We had to make some tough decisions about the number of communities that we could include just for feasibility. We did look at a number of different communities in Eastern Ontario and landed at the ones that you saw because we thought they represented a good diversity of demographics, sort of labor market characteristics, and also geographies. But you are right. We're missing Eastern Ontario in our current selection of test sites. That was not intentional. It was just a limitation. Well, as those questions percolate, I will also open up the floor to questions. We had 3 excellent panelists, 2 of which are with us on the call. So if folks have any questions for the project team or for those panelists, now is also a time that we welcome them. There we go. I am unclear about what this study will provide as outcomes. Will it lay out the types of skills employees will need over the next decade, for example? That's a great question. I am also going to allow anyone who's a panelist to jump in here. What we're not expecting out of this is a report that is, the Brookfield Institute published a report earlier in the year called Employment in 2030 that looked at the forecast for occupational growth that kind of did exactly what you've talked about, the expectations for skills demand in Canada in the coming decade. We're not expecting to repeat that, which is a recent piece of research that has been quite well received. What we are expecting in terms of outcomes are a couple of things. One of them is that we are expecting to fully test and make recommendations for a pathway for job seekers, for workers who are currently working as clerks or shelf stockers in grocery stores in Ontario. We did this for 2 other occupations in theory in the previous phase of our job pathways research, but it was a much more limited study and didn't involve the in-depth local research that we're able to do here. So one of the outcomes will be a pathway for those occupations. Another outcome will be a pathway for an occupation that is robust or high growth, going backwards and working from a destination occupation, which is seen to be to likely experience talent gaps, and make recommendations about how or where workers could move into that destination job in Ontario. So those are the 2 pathways that we're working. As we work through those pathways, we are expecting to improve and refine the model. The model was published in a playbook last year called Lost and Found, and we are expecting to update the playbook. The playbook involves a step-by-step approach that could be used by different job developers or economic developers who wish to replicate the project. We're looking to build on that so that it is both more granular, more customizable, and if and when we have particular tools for example, survey instruments or statistical models that are useful, or sources of data, that we point to those in the updated playbook. So you'll see the outputs are the pathways and also the tools and the refined playbook. As we go through the research, we expect we're going to be learning different things about the sector and about workers' preferences. So those will be shared and documented as well. In terms of outcomes, that is partially reliant on use. So what we hope is that an outcome will be that those products that I outlined, the pathways and the improved playbook, are used and applied so that programs or interventions to support mid-career job seekers are better targeted, or that outcomes are possibly better, more successful. And so a hoped and intended outcome is that the research outputs are applied by different actors, by policymakers, by job developers, or organizations like UFCW, to ensure that where we're designing interventions, that they're appropriately targeted, and where insights have been useful, they can be strengthened. I hope that was clear in terms of intended outcomes. A comment from Solomon Thomas. The Center for Education and Training are working on an employment research pilot supporting visible minority newcomer women and exploring opportunities in food service, particularly in senior care settings. We'd love to learn and share information. Excellent, Solomon, we're excited to connect with you. That sounds fascinating. Thank you to Diana. Diana is a senior economist on our project team who notes that, of course, even though Eastern Ontario is not included in our focus communities, that we hope that the findings will be applicable there. A question from Jillian Mason, wondering if folks have seen success in systems changes, complete pathways from employers through those who offer skills upgrading and social services to job seekers. Has anyone seen successful systems changes in Canada or elsewhere? And Sarah Doyle, who you heard from earlier, went back to Jillian and commented that we have 2 case studies that are a couple of years old that looked at interesting and maybe replicable lessons from the BioWork program in North Carolina and Nokia's Bridge program in Finland. And if you're curious, I'm just reading from our chat function. We'll give it a couple more minutes in case there's anyone who's got any other questions or who wants to respond to any of the questions that we've posed. There's a comment from Fabio Creston. Thank you for the presentation. Related to outcome 1, will the pathways lead to different sectors and occupations, or only one sector and occupation only? Great question, Fabio. We actually, we don't know where they're going to lead yet, but we are not focused only on food retail. So I think there may well be pathways and opportunities within the food retail sector. If those appear to be most promising, then they will certainly be included. In the event that that is not the case, or there is an alternative pathway that is outside of the food retail sector, then that will be those will be included. So we expect part of the reason that we've been looking so hard at food retail is because there may be pathways within that sector to investigate and understand. And given that it's changing so much, we really wanted to get a handle on some of those changes and what they actually mean in terms of skills. So it could be one, it could be the other. We're not solely focused within food retail, even though the origin occupations are there. I'm expecting that we will probably end up with about 2 destination occupations. So a lot of it depends on what we find what the data show. There's Annalise. Annalise is a team member and an author of the first report. She's put the link to the first report, Pathways to Inclusive Innovation. Oh, my mistake, to the case studies in the chat. So if you're interested in those case studies, thanks, Annalise, for sharing. Question from Mona Ali. Will this research inform and help reform government-funded programs and interventions such as Second Career? Great question, Mona. We hope so. We hope that where it's useful, it will do exactly that. That said, we sit at the Brookfield Institute and we are housed at Ryerson University. We would very much like to work with partners in government-funded programs or who will work around government-funded programs. And that's the reason why we're holding this event and really inviting the input. We could absolutely produce some reports that sit on shelves or that are theoretically interesting and not at all useful. And we really don't want to do that. So if there is anybody on this call who has responsibility for those kind of programs or who has thoughts about what we could do that is useful in terms of the questions that we're asking or the outputs that we're producing, the timing or the format, we'd love to hear from you. We've already had a couple of conversations with folks like that as part of our approach to understanding potential use. And so we're grateful to a range of government actors who've had those conversations with us. Yes, as folks who aren't responsible for the program, there's only so much we can do. So we welcome that feedback in order to capitalize on those opportunities wherever you see them. Sharon from NLWIC. As we move through the research, how would you recommend we all continue to engage with Brookfield on the learnings and the progress generally? Are there specific platforms to watch for? Thanks so much, Sharon, for asking. If you are on this webinar, we hope that you are also signed up to receive emails from the Brookfield Institute. We would, if you happen to have received this link forwarded from someone else, please do take a minute and sign up for our email list. We share information on different things that we're looking at and different blogs and reports as they come. So do sign up to email. We also have a Twitter. Actually, if you don't mind, we'll move to our last slide. And you can see all of our social media locations. So we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on LinkedIn. You'll see blogs and reports shared there as well. But who knows what those algorithms are doing any day? Who knows if you're going to see everything? The best way to know that you're receiving everything is to sign up by email. And that is also the place where we will share invitations for future events like this. Thanks for the question, Sharon. We've got about 4 minutes left before the end of the hour, so we will have a look at the chat feature and see if there's anything else coming here. Right. So the one thing that I have neglected to say and need to say is that we would love to bounce some of the early insights that we see, some of our lessons off folks like you. As we start to learn things and before we actually write reports or produce communications tools, we'd like to hear what people think and take that input to make sure that the final outputs are useful. So we'd love to reconvene and invite you back to another call like this when we've got something new to say about the research and the findings. So we do hope that you'd be interested in that. If you've got a colleague or someone that you know who might be interested in that, you are welcome to pass on that invitation or let us know about them and we can start a dialogue with them. We hope that this isn't the last time that we talk to you because as you've heard a couple of times, we really think that your advice and your guidance can really help us make sure that this is as useful as it could be. I'm not seeing anything else on the chat bar or on the questions feature. We've had some really interesting inputs from our panelists and from others over the course of this. So thanks so much for spending the hour with us. To our panelists across the country and to the folks who've joined us from different time zones, we hope we get the chance to work with you or collaborate with you in the future. We are really excited about the promise for this method and this approach, and we're delighted to see the kind of turnout that we saw today. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope to continue the conversation. Have a great afternoon. Goodbye now.